All right, so first of all, tell us what we're smoking today.
We are smoking a Padron 1964 anniversary series, and I'm not sure specifically what model that is. It's on the box over there, but it's around a 48 ring, 6-inch.
What's
length.
the technical?
Or it started
term?
that way. Trust me, this was bigger when we started these.
What's the term when they're like compressed or smashed?
Box
like squared?
press.
Box pressed.
Yeah.
I like these. Yeah. Good stuff.
So, yeah, we started a few of these a little bit earlier than the recording. So if I have to walk off camera and get another one while we're chatting, that just might have to happen.
So Banzai called me a few minutes ago and said he forgot cigars. Or he forgot the cigars he meant to bring. But don't worry, I have some spares. And so I was like, oh, okay, I guess he's got some spares. The spares, he pulls out an entire box of cigars. Like this is the backup. The backup cigar is an entire box of Padrones.
Well, coming out to a Men's Alliance event, you can never be you don't want to show up underprepared.
That's right. We got enough cigars to talk for a while.
Yes, we do.
So this is Banzai Chronicles number 3.
Yes.
And we thought today we'd ask some questions and hear some stories about more of the family side of stuff, the starting a family, getting married, and having kids, and hear about the Banzai adventures in that department.
Looking forward to it. And when we talk about the business side of things, I think I had a little bit more of an intuition on what I would need to do. I had decent instincts when it came to parenting. My learning curve was a little bit slower, and I have a lot more of what not to do, stories and things to go, yeah, I didn't naturally figure that out, but after screwing it up once or twice, I would eventually either self-correct or be corrected. So
sometimes just knowing what not to do is actually really helpful.
Yes, and I didn't, and like I said, with business, I think I had more instincts of what not to do. With the parenting, I had more to learn.
Yeah.
I had more to learn.
Yeah. So how old were you? Remind us again, how old were you when you got married?
So Kelly and I were 24 when we got married. We got engaged probably within a year out of college, something like that. Yeah, it puts us at 23, and then we were married at 24. We lived on Long Island, New York at the time, and escaped 1 year after that. We fled.
Escaped from New York.
We did escape from New York. We literally got out a map. She and I got out a map one afternoon. And we were just fed up. I was coming home from work. She had a job then. We didn't have kids. We're both working. Both had decent jobs at the time. But we're living in some police officer's converted garage that was my apartment. And we just weren't going forward. So we got out a map one day and went, California's too far. There's no beaches over here. Let's go to, we looked at Maryland, North Carolina, and Virginia. And no New Yorkers in the 90s were going any further south than that. Atlanta hadn't started growing yet. The northern invasion stopped at the North Carolina border. We've found that Maryland is exactly like Long Island. You're outside a major suburb with traffic and taxes. What's the point of moving? And we landed in Virginia.
That's a very rational decision.
That
makes sense.
That was.
What year?
That was 1990. We moved February 94.
Okay.
Yeah, Kelly had, it was actually her idea. She was like, again, I'm going forward and working and doing my stuff. And back then I was probably 90% chance I had 2 jobs going at that time or more. And we just, like I said, weren't getting any farther ahead. And she's like, let's just get out of here. And I was like, at first I was like, I don't know. Then we came down to visit. And one of the neighborhoods we actually hit was this one that was in the Brander Mill area. We drove around, we saw the prices of houses. We ended up living not too far across the street from where we're sitting right now in the Deer Run subdivision when it was being built. First house, I had a house on a half an acre with 3 bedrooms within a year after moving down here, and that was the same price I was paying to live in that guy's garage.
Right.
That included my taxes and insurance.
Yeah. You know, I think not being willing to move is something that holds so many people back.
Oh, it's
so many people, the vast majority of people, they know they're not in ideal circumstances. They know their location is not conducive to meeting their goals or whatever, but they just can't seem to, I don't know if it's a risk aversion or just some, tie to familiarity. They don't want to uproot and move. And that's really, that's the whole spirit of what, founded this continent, was a bunch of people that were willing to hop on a small wooden sailboat and head across the Atlantic.
Yep.
And then it's the same westward expansion thing that sent people in to be pioneers and settlers. But I just think that very decision that you guys made to let's pack up and leave everything we know and go somewhere that looks more promising.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at that one decision you guys made that changed your entire trajectory of everything in your life.
It really did, because the whole mindset, not to pick on my New York friends, but the whole mindset of living there is completely different. It's like everyone's under stress 24/7. You're constantly in tension. The volume of a conversation starts at yelling and works its way up to scream. But it's never calm. There's never tranquility in any interaction at all. The traffic itself.
Yeah.
All of it. All of these things diminished the quality of life. And we talked briefly about the topic of, it was more of a business-oriented podcast, but we were talking about some of the guys who they're struggling at being a provider. And one of the things is they feel like they can't move. They can't do anything. You can't change jobs. You can't do whatever you're doing now at 27 is the thing you're going to be doing at 57. It doesn't have to be that way, but that fear of change is way bigger for a lot of people than it is for others, but it's a huge factor.
I never thought of this before, but just hearing you say this. So I just got done reading through Exodus. And so much of the story of the Bible is God moving people.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He's telling Abraham, uproot, take everything you know, and go to a new place.
Yep.
And that happens throughout Old and New Testament. There's just a lot of, I think there's almost a spiritual component, like a spiritual challenge to, are you willing to uproot and move?
I found the challenge for us, we didn't see it as that big of a thing, because we were like, if this doesn't work, I'll just move back.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, okay, we don't like it, we do it, don't like it. It's very different from the settlers here, because they were risking their life to get here.
Yeah.
Because they were going to be killed if they stayed over there, so they fled to come over here. And then David McCullough writes a wonderful book about the pioneers and the life and how arduous of a task it was to be a pioneer. I'm like, I got on Route 95 and I drove south, found an apartment. They had them pre-built and pre-made in the modern era of the 90s. They actually had buildings already built and you could simply move into them, unlike the pioneers. And so if we didn't like it, you could turn around and go back. But
that's, you make it sound easy when you say that, but there's millions of people that, to them, it's arduous, right?
Yeah.
To you is it's not a big deal, but I think there's a realization that, but it's not that easy to everybody.
I never had a fear, I don't know why, of getting a job. The fear of getting employment didn't bother me. That I could make enough to live on, for me, was that's just basic.
Right.
Because I have to.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like you have a choice,
Yeah.
right? It's like, whatever it takes to make a living, you'll do that
I'm going to
thing.
make it.
Yeah, I'll make it. Now, whether or not I can climb was
Yeah.
always the,
Yeah.
but that I could get a job paying my mortgage and a car payment. Fundamental. The food for a child is not a lot.
Yeah.
Contrary to popular belief, when people tell you about, kids are expensive, babies are not really that expensive.
Right.
It's in America, we buy $87,000 worth of crap that's going to eventually go in a dumpster, which makes it expensive. But the little onesies at Target are $3,
Yeah.
and the diapers, they are expensive.
The cans of peas, the little jars of, mashed carrots. And, people also forget, like, they make cloth diapers. Like it can be as inexpensive as you want it to be.
Yeah, yeah. So the fear of fundamentally being able to get employment somewhere, and again, if you grew up in an area and you move away and you go back, you didn't lose all the connections you have. You still have your friends, your family, all the people you went to high school with, you went to college with, wherever you grew up. Someone in your network will help you get employment somehow, some way. You just solve the problem because you have to. So getting a basic job or a basic level career never intimidated me. So I was like, if it doesn't work, we'll just turn around and come back.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. Realizing that very few decisions in life, there's a couple of them, but you could probably count them on one hand. Decisions that these are not easily reversed, but
Right.
they're very few and far between.
Yeah.
Very few and far between.
It's like, oh no, I moved. People do it constantly.
Yeah, move
I mean,
back.
millions and millions and millions of people move every year in this country. You're like, well, then you could probably do it too.
Yeah.
Think of the dumbest person who had to move in the United States, right? He got transferred, whatever reason, he didn't want to move, he left. You just have to be smarter than the dumbest guy ever to succeed.
That's a great way to look at it. I always think too, like if God wanted you to move, what would that look like? Right? And sometimes you realize when you ask yourself that, you realize the answer is it would look a lot like this right here. Right? Like whatever's happening to me that's compelling me to move, like maybe you should pay attention to that feeling. Because I see a lot of young people today, they have a lot more paralysis from fear of making a wrong decision. Like, what if I pick the wrong college? What if I pick the wrong major? What if I get the wrong degree or start the wrong career? But I think, tell me if you would agree with this, you probably see that as a much more easily reversed decision. Like, hey, if you pick the wrong school, go transfer. If you pick the wrong major, switch degrees. If you pick the wrong career, well, start a different one, right? If you pick the wrong state to live in, we'll move.
Yeah, I had a slew of jobs before I landed in financial planning. Yeah. None of which had anything to do with economics or finance or anything. And so it was like, I just need employment. I need a job. And that's the other thing. It's like, I think it's a combination of both fear and being, to a degree, spoiled, but they don't know it, because it's like, I want a job, but I'm only going to take a job where I can work from home, and I'm only going to take a job, and I'm only going to take a job that, and they start having these lists of things that you're not going to do. And so you start out with, well, you gave yourself this impossible task, because no one thinks you're an expert at 22 on pretty much any subject, unless you are a very rare exception where you have an outstanding computer knowledge or engineering brain.
Right.
But without experience in the field, they don't view you as invaluable to the corporation, right? So when you start putting all of these criteria on things you're not going to do, you make job hunting obviously a lot more difficult. Where I was like, I need to make this much. If I'm digging a hole or I'm sitting in an office, I'm good either way, but I just need to make this much money. And so I didn't care what you had me do that afternoon. I would just show up. And so it worked. And I was like, that's why I always knew I can get a job, because I could do something.
Yeah.
But if you go, I'm only going to do this from my office, from my house, from my couch, and I need, I got to start out with 17 weeks vacation, and I got to have this, and I got to have this, and well, you limit yourself. So I think it's a combination of the normal fear factors, and then the idea of what your employment is supposed to look like versus what your job as a provider is supposed to look like. And that's pretty much doing what you need to do to make it work.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, so first kid, intentional or accidental?
Intentional. Intentional. We talked about having kids, and Nicole was our first. She just got married, as I mentioned, this past weekend. So she's now 28, and yeah, we decided to have a family. And Kelly came from a family where the kids were spaced out pretty far apart. So she is 14 years older, 16 years older than her youngest brother.
Oh, that is pretty far out.
Yeah. And so, and that's Sled, by the way, is the youngest brother.
Sled.
So there's a huge gap. So I believe he was probably 2 or 3 when Kelly originally moved out of her house. And so it was a very different type of relationship. It was more like an aunt. It wasn't very much like a sibling.
Yeah.
And so she wanted to have the kids closer together. So we had decided pretty quickly we were going to start having a family. So it was Nicole, then Rachel, then Kevin, and they were about 18 months apart.
Boom.
Yeah. And so we had 3 kids all under the age of 4. 4 and under, which ended up being wonderful, by the way. It was great.
You front load.
Yeah.
Right. I think a lot of our I don't know that difficulties is really the right word, but maybe just like our amount of work or our challenges that we have in life, we can kind of choose a little bit sometimes. Mm-hmm. Do we want to front load this? Or, as is becoming more popular, is like backloading it, right? Where people just remain kind of carefree and untethered through their 20s and 30s, and then they start settling down and getting married and having kids now later in life. I was just reading, like, it used to be like, I'll get this slightly wrong, but the gist of the statistic I just read was in the 80s, 80% of men were married by the time they were 30. Mm-hmm. And now it's like less than 20%. Right? So people they're kicking the can down the road. But it's going to be hard whenever it hits you.
Right. Right.
And so my wife and I, we also front loaded, right? We wanted to be young when we had kids. And same as Kelly, right? It was because it was the opposite of what we saw. Mm-hmm. Right? Like we wanted to be able to, run and wrestle with our kids.
Right.
Right. Which the trade-off to that is you don't have as much money when you're young and you don't have as much wisdom.
Right.
But you have your energy and your health.
Right. Right. And that goes back to some of the comments I was making earlier. I had a lot of energy, but didn't have a lot of wisdom on how to be a dad, how to do some of these things.
So to kids listening to this and they're like, yeah, my dad or mom, they didn't have a lot of wisdom. They didn't really know what they were doing. Okay, but did they have a lot of energy? Did they play with you a lot? Right?
Yeah,
like there's a trade there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, these Hollywood actors that are having kids when they're 60, I'm like,
right.
You're farming out everything to a nanny or to someone else.
That's so far over the hump. You have neither the wisdom nor anything, just simply because you're not there.
Right.
Right now you're just
the only thing you have is money to contribute to the rearing of this child is your cash flow.
That's right.
Which is terrible.
Okay, so how old were you by the time you had all 3?
So 01, that puts me at 33-ish, 68, 32. So 2001, Kevin was born, and so 33-ish.
Okay, so 33, you got three kids under 4. That's a pretty good That's a pretty good spot.
Yeah,
33.
I thought it was prime time.
Yeah,
It was
33
like,
is a sweet spot. You're
yeah,
not the rookie anymore.
right, right, right. I, and again, I think the timing was obviously that's all in God's hands and God's doing, and He was guiding us a lot more, even though we weren't asking for it back then, because really neither of us was very heavily involved in faith at all at the time. So you talk about undeserved blessings. That was definitely there was a lot of that He was taking care of me without me knowing about it, kind of thing. And
For sure.
but yeah, we were intentional about it. We had the kids, and it was, again, there's, at 57, when you look back, and I was really thinking a lot about this over the past few weeks with my daughter getting married, and she's the second one to get married. As you look back, you don't really remember a lot of the strain, a lot of the negative stuff while
Right.
you're enduring. Like, it's really literally gone.
Yeah.
It's like my brain just started to go, we don't need those cells anymore,
Yep.
and let's reroute those cells for some other piece
We
of
don't need to hold
information.
on to some memories.
Yeah, right. But it was like a natural thing. I didn't focus on it. It's just all of that stuff starts to go away, and you don't really remember a lot of it. And you just remember all the awesome stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like now your memory bank is just filled with this cool,
Yeah.
book of memories, which is fantastic. And so, yes, it's strenuous. Yes, it's hard. Yes, there are financial challenges. Yes, there's all of that. And if you go, wouldn't it have been better if we waited until we were more financially well off? First of all, you don't know that you're going to be. And second, I was like, I would never wait. I would never put that off till you're
Yeah.
financially ready.
Yeah.
You'll never be financially
Right.
ready. Evaluating yourself, you never. It's your excuse not to do it.
Yes. That's true for a good handful of things in life that I think most of us want to do, and we try to prepare and get ready to do.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to realize at some point you just got to go. You just got to do it. You just got to pull the trigger, because you're never going to think you're prepared to have a kid.
Oh, totally. I was definitely not.
Right. It's like you try to, you like buy a bigger apartment, you paint a baby room, whatever. You're never going to be ready. You just got to have it.
Yeah.
Right.
My dad had 3 kids in 1 bedroom in a 2-bedroom apartment. So he and my mom had 1 bedroom. There was a set of bunk beds and my crib in the other bedroom. And so I had an older brother, older sister, and then me, and then eventually my younger brother would come along. But they were like, yeah, we're not financially ready. We're not anywhere near financially killing it. My father didn't start to make decent money until I was in high school.
Yeah.
And so, they weren't really, and neither did anybody else. Nobody else was rich
Yeah.
back then. You look at middle class, what did middle class look like back then? It's ridiculous what people think they should have before they could start having a kid now.
Oh man, that's so true.
And I do feel old saying that, like, oh, these kids nowadays, but it's like, it is just factually correct. It's like, I have to have this and this and this. Well, I need, my 3,700 square foot house, in this particular area, and
Right.
I gotta have this, and then when I have my car paid for, and then I have this done, and then I'll have kids. You're like, you're just using it as an excuse.
A lot of kids, I think about myself, I think about my kids, think about your story. By the time you kind of become aware of what your parents have, you're probably in high school, maybe middle school. You start to be aware of, like, oh, here's the car we have, here's the house we have. You start noticing, and then you leave home, you become an adult. There's got to be this realization that your parents didn't start at that. And
Yeah.
so you won't either, right? Like you don't start off at 18 where your parents are at whatever 40 or 50.
Sure.
And there's this acceptance of that I think is really important. And if you accept it and you roll up your sleeves and you go to work, you're gonna do great. But if you're frustrated that at age 22, you're not living like you were when you were in your parents' house at 14, I see that hold people back, right? And I think this is where you see people get in like huge debt trouble and stuff right off the bat, because they're trying to go from what their parents had to the same thing, but without taking that. Everybody has to go back to pass and go. You got to pass go.
Right.
So one of the things I'm hearing, and I asked you all kinds of numbersy questions, what year, how old,
Yeah.
all this stuff. So like one of the things I'm just observing from your story is that your kids right now, and as we're talking, this is December of 25, and your kids right now, one daughter just had a baby. One daughter just got married.
By the way, my grandson is in the Guinness Book of World Records already for the cutest kid ever born.
Oh, congratulations.
It's already there.
Congratulations.
Yes, he's absolutely adorable.
So you got one just had a kid, one just got married, and then Locks just started a career.
Chords, yeah.
Yeah. Chords.
Yep, and he's engaged
And,
as well.
Engaged. So it's like you're telling this story about your beginning, and they're kind of all three in that place now.
Yep.
And so I'd be curious, like, what would be some of your best advice to each of them to the stage they're in now?
I actually asked them that, knowing we were going to be doing some of these podcasts and really targeting folks that are younger than I am for overwhelming bulk of the information we're going to be covering in these podcasts. And part of it is really hearing the stories that we didn't. When I first had Nicole, that was the first time Kelly stopped working. And I had a job, but I didn't have a good job. I wasn't killing it. I was making not quite enough money to get by on, and some of the other stories we've already shared. But I was broke. So this whole thing of, we waited until we were financially secure, that was just not the case in my case. It was, we're ready to do this and we'll just make it work. I'll figure it out from the provider perspective, because again, you have to. So therefore, when you're left with it's that failure is not an option expression really applies here. And so you have to. You just figure it out. You just do it. And you don't have all the answers, and you don't have the wisdom that you do 30 years later, And so we were just young kids starting out, wanted to have a family. We knew we wanted to have kids, and we just started doing it. And it was like, and it worked out, and it's awesome.
Yeah.
So the fact that we were broke, the fact that we didn't have a lot of the answers, the fact that some of the wisdom I have now, I certainly didn't have at that age. There was a lot of things I was running around in the dark on. And you're just a regular guy doing your regular stuff, and it wasn't special in the true sense. There wasn't anything unique or miraculous about what Kelly and I did to get a family going back in the 90s.
Yeah.
It was everybody, was in the same type of place that we were.
Yeah.
And so the fact that it was so ordinary is actually helpful to them, because it didn't have to be this special thing that takes place. Like, people have been having families in the poorest countries in the world and making it work somehow for thousands of years. You just have to be smarter than one of them. You just have to be smarter than the dumbest person ever to have a family and provide for them. You just have to be that level smart. And you're like, okay, if I'm not the dumbest person that I've ever met, I should be able to do this.
Yeah. That's a relaxing kind of a realization, because you realize, like, hey, this process is repeatable.
Yeah.
Right.
Totally.
Like, I didn't get here through some sort of, miraculous ability. I got here through a pretty average, common drive that if I could do, you could do. Like, that's what I'm hearing you say.
And that's been, honestly, a mantra of mine for years. I don't know how I picked it up or where that came from. That's probably for a therapist to figure out at some later date. But the fact that if that person could do it, I could do it, And again, I wouldn't do that with ridiculous level goals, right? You know, a world record sprinter or a guy bench pressing, or I
Yeah.
have to beat Elon Musk in net worth, and because now you're looking to be the freak exception.
The outlet. Yeah.
Yeah, but you know, the fact that it was just two ordinary people who grew up middle class America,
Yeah.
moved, started having a family. So the fact that it can be done and obstacles can be overcome by ordinary people all the time. So that would be one of the pieces of advice. The second is be intentional. We're not all born and programmed with great parenting skills, and especially depending on what type of upbringing you came from, a lot of people do what their parents did. In some cases that could be wonderful, in some
Yeah.
cases that could be a horror show. You have to examine yourself and your life and your direction and be intentional about it. Focus on it. Ask yourself the question, how's this working for me? In all these different areas of life, and realize you don't have to learn everything and solve every problem immediately, but if you put in the effort, you'll do better than most people, because most people are just wandering around in the dark.
Yeah. I always liked that quote, you know, like 90% of success is showing up.
It really is.
The other 10% is a drive, you know, to like, hey, I'm gonna put in the work. I'm gonna do whatever it takes. And if you get somebody that shows up and has that kind of mentality, it's amazing. It's always shocking how many of the population they will beat out that just don't
100%.
have those two basic things.
100%.
All right, I'm going to ask you one really tough question. This might be a couple puff
All right.
question.
Uh-oh.
But then I got an easy question while you're thinking of this one. So the harder question is, I would love to hear what's one of like the biggest mistakes you made along the way. I think that would be beneficial to hear is what's one of your bigger mistakes or setbacks. And while you're thinking of that one, the other question is, and maybe they're related, maybe they're not, but if you could give 22-year-old Banzai a piece of advice, what would that be?
So, and they are related. And I would say the biggest mistake is not being open to learning how to be a better father, better person earlier on. So the things that were my nature, sarcasm, you know, more of, you know, if you're little, you know, you're my kid, you're going to, you know, do what I tell you to do, and you're more the boss than you are the father. I would have learned earlier that each child has a different personality, and it is my job, not their job. It's my job to understand that personality earlier on, and how do I connect better to that person in order to be a better father and leader. Because leadership, people have different things that they, you know, if you're, whether it's an employee or a parent, your employees, all humans have different things that they react to and respond to. And just because I said so isn't really, yes, you deserve respect as the parent, but leaving it as because I said so doesn't help in their growth, doesn't help in your relationship. So I would have learned more about how the brain works and personalities and understanding people better, and have been much more willing to change and adapt and be more coachable myself early on, because I was like, little arrogance is a problem of mine, but it's a smaller problem than it used to be. I could see it, if not always while I'm in it, not too far after I'm in it, I'll recognize, yeah, I shouldn't have done it that way. I was not as much like that. So to go out and find the wisdom of other people that have done this well, and to emulate good parenting skills, and I would have been more invested in that. I would have done that much earlier on. I would have been better. And so there was that. And what was the easier question?
The piece of advice you would give 22-year-old Banzai.
Don't be afraid. It'll all work out. You know, I would explain what be anxious for nothing actually means. Because it's in the Bible. I don't know how many times. I think I looked it up one time, but it was like, double digits, if not 100 times, where they don't worry, don't stress. Why do they say it so many times? Because you are going to worry, and you are going to stress, and you are going to freak out, and you are going to do that, and you're like, having the confidence that it'll be okay, and you'll figure it out. It's the effort. Figure out the problem, and work on diligently solving it, and emulate others that have been successful. So parenting and human nature, nothing is new. There's nothing that you're going to do that's new. So if it's all been done before, and it's been done well, and it's been done poorly, shun the poorly done parenting, and try to copy as best you can the good skills of the good parent, and try to find somebody you'd like to emulate. And what do you want to see down the road? What kind of relationship do you want with that child when you're older? And I would have started on that earlier. And don't come into it where you think you know everything, and then having that arrogance of whatever I knew at the time I'm 24 is what I need to know. I would seek that wisdom and make it intentional of how to be better at the job of being a father.
Man, that's good.
So I'm going to ask you the same question right back at you.
Okay.
What would you say one of your biggest mistakes was? And I'll let you answer the easier question first also while you're thinking of it.
Yeah.
If you want. What pieces of advice would you give to young Goose?
Well, I definitely wish I would have gone all in. And there's all different kinds of words we use to express this, like making Jesus Lord of your life. That's an expression. And I heard that a million times in church growing up and didn't really know what it meant. I would have said, yeah, I've done that. I absolutely had not done that.
Mm-hmm.
I was absolutely the Lord of my life, trying to do my stuff my way. It wasn't until I was 35, almost 36, that I was like, God, I want you to have absolute total control over every part of my life. I don't want to try to control this anymore. I want you to be in charge of every aspect. I wish I would have done that much sooner. I wish I would have gone all in on Jesus.
Right.
If I would have done that at 18 or 22 or something like that, man, I think my life would have been so much better. If I wouldn't have mucked it up until my mid-30s and then gone on it, because what I noticed was, I think my thought process through my 20s and first half of my 30s was that I wanted to have a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
And you realize, looking back on it, that you didn't have any fun.
In the true sense.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. You didn't have joy. You didn't have peace. You did a lot of crazy things that you thought at the time equaled fun. But so I'm almost 47 now. So for the past 11 years, since really truly making Jesus the Lord of my life, I've had far more fun than I've ever had in my life before that. And I'm like, man, this is what true living is supposed to be like. This is joy. This is peace. And so I would have said to myself, do that way sooner. Your life will be way better afterwards. after you stop trying to steer the ship. Because I crashed my ship into the rocks. And I was like, man, why didn't I, the phrase, Jesus, take the wheel? That's such a great phrase. I'm like, man, should have given him the wheel a long time ago.
Yep, 100%.
That's what I would tell my younger self, which is, really hand in hand with the other question. That was the biggest mistake I made too, was trying to do everything my way. I was trying to, and I didn't see this at the time, but I see it now. I was trying to do whatever I wanted to do and then ask God to bless that. Right? Hey, God, here's what I'm going to do. Please help this work.
Yeah.
Instead of like, God, what would you have me do? And one of the prayers that I started praying 10 or so years ago was, because this is a reflection of my own lack of wisdom, lack of foresight. So I would start praying, God, please close the wrong doors for me. Don't let me go through wrong doors. Close them for me, and please open the right doors. Like, I need you to make this clear to me. I need you to make my choices obvious. And I need you to do that for me, God. Close the wrong doors. Don't let me walk through them, and open the right ones. And honestly, he has absolutely answered that. I've seen this happen in 24 different ways over the past decade. I'll start to try to do something, and it just won't work out for 100 different reasons. I can't make it work out.
Right.
And then as soon as I pivot slightly to do this thing this way, all the doors just fly right open.
Yep.
And you're like, okay, God, I guess that's what you're showing me, right? So I think that's one way. I think that, James chapter 1 says, if you ask God for wisdom, he will give it to you, which is like, there's not that many things that are that kind of a promise in the Bible.
Right.
But if you ask for wisdom, he's telling you, I'm going to give you wisdom if you ask for it. So, but what does that look like? How do you know if you have wisdom? And I think that's what it looks like. It looks like the wisdom to stop trying to go through the doors that are bolted shut.
Right.
There's a reason.
I've closed this for a reason.
There's a reason they're bolted shut.
Stop trying to pick the lock. Yeah.
And if maybe the doors that are flying open in front of you were not something you had considered, be open to them as a possibility, like moving or starting something or ending something. Even be like, hey, maybe this is God. And I know you've said this before about some decisions where Kelly made that decision. Kelly saw this. I absolutely have those same moments in my life where Carrie saw something. She'd be like, you realize, like, this is God showing you this, right? And of course, I'm like, oh, yeah, totally, of course. Yeah.
Never would have seen that, but yes.
And then I'm like, man, I'm glad she saw that. And, everybody knows that a woman's brain is different from a man's, and women think differently and stuff. We all know that. But I think the way as a married man, or for a married woman, I think this is true too. You got to recognize the fact that your spouse has kind of like the other half of the puzzle pieces. And if you're not listening to your spouse, you're like trying to fight through life with one arm tied behind your back. These guys that don't really listen to their wife, and they're trying to do everything that they think is right, and they're dismissive of their wife's inputs, they got one arm tied behind their back. Because
100%. When
you take the woman who thinks with the right half of her brain, and the man that thinks with the left half of his brain, God designed that on purpose. And then he said the two shall become one.
Yep.
And so you're literally depriving yourself of half of your decision-making, brain thinking ability if you are not sitting down every day having these conversations with your wife and allowing her to speak into the decision-making process of the family too. And then you weigh all that, and then I think, ultimately as the man, you're supposed to be the leader, but that's not meaning like without taking their input into account, right? Like,
yeah, that's not what that means.
that's something I would love to tell, more newly married men and women, is that concept of you each got half of the solution here, and God wants you to become one. And then as a team, I think you will come up with far better decisions as a team than either of you would have come up with on your own.
Yeah, 100%. And, just from the other times we've talked, that has been so true in my life. There have been a bunch of decisions made where I'm like, I'd have never thought of that. Not only would I would have never even considered it as an option. And some of them I was resistant to at first. And I'm like, really? What? And then you process it and you go, that was a great idea. It became one of the greatest decisions ever. So
yeah, that's right.
That's great. So one thing I'll add to the advice thing, and then we'll close this out for today, is especially with fathers and sons, I think there's age-appropriate times where you can share your mistakes and share your humanity. Where you didn't play it right, you did a dumb thing, you did something foolish, you did something stupid when you were younger, where a lot of sons will compare themselves to their fathers in a number of different ways, and that can be healthy in some cases and not in others. But I think my son and I started to get closer when we would have life-type talks, and I would share some of my stupid things that I did, bad decisions I made, times I was afraid. That's another thing. It's like, that that you had fear, you were afraid of something. It's
Dad?
like Dad was afraid, making sure your kids know you're proud of them. So Kevin is taking a very different path career-wise than I did. I'm fine with that. I'm good with that. But he needs to know that. He needs. So we had that kind of conversation. The fact that he didn't follow in my footsteps, I'm completely fine with that. I prefer you didn't. Do something else. Go do your thing. And he is. And so sharing being a little bit more vulnerable, I guess is the way to describe it, and there are screw-ups that I made. It actually helps build the respect, and it also helps with their confidence, knowing that they can make mistakes and have errors too, in that it wasn't some flawless decision-making process to go from here to here. That's not how it worked. It was, my list of stupid decisions is legion, and so when you start sharing a couple of those dumb stories, things you did, foolishly as a kid or whatever, it starts to go, oh, he is human. But it also, from their perspective, is I don't have to be perfect either then. And so I think that was really helpful in our communication and relationship.
That's good.
Well, I'm about out of cigar, man. So why don't we call it for today? And any last closing thoughts?
I got one. I got the official Bronx Tale question. Is it? And this may be, I'm pivoting back here more to like career and job and professional bonsai, not the husband-father bonsai, but the question is, is it better to be loved or feared?
Definitely when it comes to your family, love is way more important than feared. I think respect is necessary. That's not fear. I don't want my kids, and I never did. This was not a thing. I think I would have been a stronger, more hands-on disciplinarian without Kelly making it having us focus. That's not how we're going to raise the kids. But I never wanted my son to be afraid of me. I wanted him to respect me, but the fact that I was going to take my belt off and beat him senseless over a mistake, or afraid to come to me with a problem as to how I would blow up, and I don't want the fear factor with my family. That's a terrible.
Yeah.
That's a terrible. And I kind of thought that way with business also. You need to respect me as the boss. There's certain ways you will and won't talk to me in front of other people and staff. You can have a complaint, you can lodge it, but there's a way you do it and a way you don't do it. But they also needed to know I cared, as an employee, that they have families and lives and stuff outside of this job. But you need respect. So I don't think the fear thing is the way I would go. So that's my Bronx Tale answer for that.
Awesome.
All right. Good stuff today.
Yeah. Great smoke too. Thanks.
Anytime.